Welcome to Mortgage on My Mind, where we take the mystery out of mortgages and make dreams of home ownership a reality. I'm Natalie Salins, a top 1% mortgage broker with 20 years of experience, based right here in sunny Los Angeles. If you've ever wondered about pre-approvals, appraisals, or what loan product is right for you, don't worry, I've got Mortgage on My Mind, so you don't have to. Each week, I'll bring you expert advice, real-life stories, and insider tips to help you navigate California's competitive real estate market with confidence. Whether you're buying your first home, refinancing, or just curious about how it all works, this podcast is for you. So let's talk mortgages, demystify the process, and make your real estate goals a reality. Ready to get started? Let's dive in. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Mortgage on My Mind. I have a wonderful guest today, Andrea Gordon. We actually talked on her podcast about renovation loans, which we will get into on, I'm sure, one of our episodes. But she is a distinguished real estate professional. She's been in the business over 27 years in the Bay Area, actually, and is a top producing agent that delivers, exceptional service and solving complex transaction issues and really guides clients through the most significant decision of their lives. She's also the creator and host of Realizations podcast, which offers a fresh perspective on real estate. And she is also teaching a class called Realizations, and she's transforming it into a book. And, sharing her expertise on this and such. So welcome, Andrea. It's so nice to have you on today.
Thank you. I should hire you to be my PR person.
Yeah, I'm not so sure that's my expertise.
No, you are an absolutely excellent mortgage broker. I remember very distinctly how completely great at explaining things you were to me on our show. And and if your clients get that kind of very, very specific care from you, I am sure that all of them are exceedingly happy.
Oh, thank you for saying That's so nice. That is what I think my strength is, that I have the patience to really deliver hard things to understand in a way that people understand them,
Exactly.
And being able to.
No one understands a financial transaction automatically.
Right?
No one understands a real estate transaction automatically. They're all so weird. They're all so filled with what seemingly feels arbitrary, that it's important to have somebody on the other side who can sort of explain the history of how things got to where they were and why you're doing what you're doing and how long it's going to take and why it's important. So that's you and me.
So true. Exactly. So I was going to ask, with so many years of experience and the seasoning that you have, what would you say is one of the greatest lessons you have learned?
The biggest lesson that I have learned is to not be a people pleaser. I have to say that. Everybody wants everybody to like them. Everybody wants everybody to be happy all the time. You never want to see any conflict. You never want to see any problems come up. But basically what our clients are doing is they are relying on us to understand what they're going through, and they're also relying on us to tell them the truth and to give them the advice that's necessary for them to make an informed and adult decision. And when you are sugarcoating anything or not, because if you're worried that it's going to hurt their feelings or make them feel bad or make them like the house less or make them feel uncomfortable in the loan that they're getting, and you choose not to talk to them about things that are important to talk to them about, then you will have failed your clients. And it was something I learned the hard way a long, long time ago. I had some clients that were very, very famous. Like, I won't tell you their names, but if I told you, you'd be like, oh, wow. And I was in awe of them. And we got into the middle of a transaction, and I was more worried about them feeling good about the things that they had sort of been assuming for themselves than I was about just doing a normal real estate transaction like I do with every other one of my clients, because I was not on my A game. I was on my awe game.
Yeah.
And so it didn't end well. The buyers ended up asking for a very, very large credit back. The sellers were absolutely convinced that their house was almost perfect, which it was not. And the transaction failed to go through. And we were unhappy. And ultimately, I did not sell the house. And it was a long, long time ago in my career. And I learned a huge lesson from it. When she said to me, all I really wanted from you was for you to be straight with me. And I thought, you know what? That's one of the best, hardest lessons I've ever gotten. And, I watched $90,000 walk away from my pocket.
Yeah.
But it was probably the best $90,000 I never earned, because ever since then, I have never had a problem having a hard conversation with somebody, because I know it actually helps them. How about that for a learning lesson?
Yeah, totally. I tell sometimes when I teach other loan officers, which can happen, I always say as much as you want to prepare yourself to always do the most incredible job and never do wrong, the only way you actually learn and the only way you actually get seasoned and truly understand all the guidelines and everything that can go into a transaction loan is when you mess up.
Yeah.
It's from you're learning from the mistake. There's no other way to learn it, really.
And also, the other thing that really bothers me when I see it in other people, and I've made a really conscious effort in my own life, is when people refuse to take blame. If I mess up, I'm the first person to own it. Mm-hmm. Because it's super important. And I've seen it time and time again where people will not take responsibility for their own actions. And
it's so easy too. Yeah, it's so easy to just be like, oh my God, sorry.
Right.
And the person on the other side immediately feels relaxed by the fact that somebody else took the responsibility.
Right.
And then it goes away so much faster. I tell my processors and my underwriters and funders, everybody always wants to find out where the blame is.
Right.
And number one, I'm always like, put the fire out first, and then we can find out why the fire was started. That's number one. Never, ever matters who's to blame until the fire is out. And then we decide who started it. But it's also so easy because we are all human.
Right.
And we all make mistakes. And once that's recognized, you can move on so easily with no hard feelings, like nothing.
And sometimes the other thing about real estate and mortgage brokerage is that you are always going to have another client. So let's say you've messed up absolutely totally with some client. You forgot to check when the offers were due and the offers passed or something horrible like that. You can't fix that. And you're not going to probably resurrect yourself in the eyes of the person that you had that mistake with. But you, once again, sort of like my little life lesson. And by the way, I've never missed an offer date in my entire time, but I was just coming up with an example. Just like my little experience with those people that I couldn't be normal with. And because I couldn't be normal with them, I wasn't being the person that I needed to be in order to be their realtor. I learned a huge, huge lesson from that, and I've never made that mistake again. So that's the benefit of mistakes. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you just, I know that a lot of realtors right now have been having a lot of trouble. I've been through 3 gigantic economic downturns in my career as a realtor. And, it's sort of like that. There's a joke in real estate that it's good to be the first love, the second wife, and the third realtor. When you go through your first economic downturn, you are not ready for it. You are usually overspending money. You're throwing all your money out in all your marketing. You're not taking care of the things you need to take care of to make sure that you're covered in the event of an economic downturn, and you get caught. The second time it happens, you see the signs, but you don't want to believe them. You sort of wait until it's like too late. And then after you take in that experience, you think to yourself, okay, what do I have to do to make sure that if this ever happens again, I'm going to be okay? And so I think it kind of takes 2 economic downturns to get to the point where you know what to do in order to protect yourself and your business and keep your business going as a realtor. So I think that's another thing that I've been taught the hard way. I learn lessons the hard way all the time. I've bought a lot of houses and sold a lot of houses for myself. And the first thing I learned doing that was that I've always hired a realtor when I've been selling one of my own properties rather than me being the person selling.
Rather than representing yourself.
Correct, because there's just too much liability on you. And also, once again, your emotions get caught up because your house is the best house, right? Whether it is or not.
Always.
And you need somebody to be on the outside, having a perspective, having that larger perspective, because you're in the forest and you can't see it for the trees. So once you have a person on the outside who can objectively look at it, who doesn't have any skin in the game, then you can be helped. So I've learned a lot of lessons all along. I've probably made every mistake in real estate a human being can make. And it enables me to see them coming when they're about to come. So, you walk into a house with some buyers and it smells like water. Well, I know what that's all about. That's all about a drainage issue, a leak, a this, a that. They're entranced by the house and think it's not a big issue. I'm like, okay, you're on a cliff. It's an upslope house. There's probably water coming down from the top of the hill all the way around the house. A French drain for this is going to cost $50,000 to $80,000.
Oh, wow.
If you were to have to replace the back wall, there would be this much. I mean, I walk in and I know those things. Whereas if I was the baby agent that I was at the very beginning, I might have walked in and gone, oh, well, you can probably deal with that. You just learn things that are not the things you want people to deal with over time.
Yeah, always.
So,
And what would you say is the greatest lesson a buyer has learned?
The greatest lesson a buyer has learned working with me, or the greatest lesson a buyer could learn?
The greatest lesson learned, like, during a transaction. Working with you, but really working overall just through a transaction, like, what would you say?
Well, I think that it's a life-changing experience for a first-time buyer to buy a home. And that's why it takes time. If you could push a button and have it all be over and put your credit card in and have a house, you would not have gone through some of the necessary stages. They're like the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross stages of dying that people have to go through. Where I always tell people that the first look on a buyer's face when they come into a house that they think they could actually buy is not one of great happiness. It's one of like, oh my God, I could actually buy this. It's fear.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to spend $1.5 million on anything. So the first thing that they're going to do is they're going to throw up every obstacle that they have to not buying that house. And if they can't get over the obstacles, that's when they give in and decide to buy it. Euphoria comes later. Initially, fear is like the biggest thing.
Yeah.
And then as they move along through the process, they start to understand things that they haven't been doing in their lives, like having a budget, being able to know where their money's going to be coming from for the next year, understanding that there are maintenance items on a house and home ownership, understanding that you need to understand the condition of a house, not just that it looks nice. They figure out stuff like, wow, I never thought about how a faucet that has a pull-out thing that can wash dishes is better than one that doesn't have one. They never think about those things, and those are things that they start to learn over the course of the process. The other things that they learn over the course of the process are how to protect themselves with insurance. They start understanding how important the schools are to what it is they're buying. They start understanding how important the traffic routes are. I serve a lot of areas that are high up in the hills that have big insurance issues right now because of all the California fires. They understand.
Even up in the Bay Area?
Oh my Lord, yeah, horrible.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Obviously here in LA, we've been doing okay. We're getting through it, and we have people that are binding and giving insurance and stuff, but it's, the premiums of course have gone up, but we're getting premiums.
I mean, there's a fire scale rating from 1 to 10. And if you're above a 5, you're going to have to get California Fair Plan in our area. And if you have to get California Fair Plan, it costs between 33 and 50% more than regular insurance. And you also still have to have another insurance policy to cover everything Fair Plan doesn't, because Fair Plan is simply for fire caused by external circumstances. It's not for fire that's caused by wiring in your house. It's not for fire that's caused by a kid playing with matches on the deck. It's for wildfire.
It's why they call it a wraparound plan, basically.
Yeah.
Exactly. So learning how much those things cost and how much you have to budget for it is kind of a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
So at the end of a real estate transaction, to finish up your first question, I think that the buyer has matured pretty radically. And it's sort of like the difference between going out with somebody, living with them, and getting married to them. There's that rush of euphoria when you're first dating somebody. Then when you move in together, you find out all the nuts and bolts and how they snore in the middle of the night or whatever. And then when you get married, there's just a slightly different feeling to being married than to being people that live together. The level of commitment that you have to the circumstance is very, very different. And I think it's the same sort of thing. So the fact that it takes a little while for buyers to finish that transaction, I think essentially marries them to the house. And they've gone
gives them time to warm to it. It's like jumping in a cold ocean.
Yeah.
You get in and it's uncomfortable and it's freezing and it takes time to warm. But
Yeah.
within, 10 minutes of doing it and learning to swim and getting your bearings, you've warmed. It's now comfortable and it's where you want to be. So
That's nice. That's nicer than the metaphor I was thinking about. I was thinking about the frog in the pot, but that's okay.
Oh, no, I'm always like, especially in the beginning of a transaction, it's so overwhelming. I tell people to put their seatbelts on for the first 3 days. 3 and 4 days are like the most important 3 days to be super cognizant of what we need on their phones. I'm going to text them. I'm going to need stuff. Everyone's reaching out to them, wanting items from them. And then it kind of calms. But the first 3 or 4 days is like 100 people.
And for realtors, it's the same thing, because you've shown that person properties most likely for several months before they pick a house that they really want to buy.
Yeah.
And then you get into this big flurry of offer writing. Say the offers are due at 2:00 on Tuesday. So you're writing the offer between Saturday and Monday night and going back and forth over ideas and what have you. So there's this big flurry there. For buyers, I think the hardest part is the time in the middle when you lenders are doing your thing, because we've had this big flurry of inspections and doing stuff and going back and seeing the house and measuring for curtains and stuff like that. And that's all done. And then you have this sort of gap where your underwriters are doing their thing before we get into the paperwork and doing all of that at the end. And that 2-week period, buyers always lose their minds. I always call them up during that time period and say, hi, I'm just checking in. I have nothing new to say to you. Do you want to go look at the house again? What have you? Your lender's doing their thing. Everything's fine. If I thought anything were the matter, I would call you and tell you, and I'm sure your lender would too. That's always a phone call that I get. The other phone call that I always get in California, it's not the same everywhere, but in California, we have supplemental property taxes. And what happens...
But that's after.
Exactly. And I
Closing.
always tell them, when we're doing the offer, I always say to them, 6 months after we close escrow, you're going to call me on the phone and you're going to freak out because you've gone out to your mailbox and you're going to find a bill from the county, and they're going to be reassessing your property to what you paid for it, because our taxes here are ad valorem, which means to the value. So your property taxes are based on what you've paid for the house, whereas Mrs. Seller had bought the house in 1985 and her taxes were $314 a year. So you'll get this big, huge bill that catches you up, and you'll be really upset about it, and you'll call me freaking out. I just want you to think about this conversation we've had. And without fail, every time they get the bill, I hear from somebody about it. So
I know.
That's the other big shock that people have.
And just for our listeners out there, supplemental taxes is when, like Andrea said, is when the seller has a much lower tax rate. What happens is the county doesn't update their records in time. And they will send out a bill to collect taxes based on the old seller's value. And then you've closed, if you've done an impound account, us as the servicer or lender are collecting for you based on the new tax rate from the new value. And then county asks us for 1/8 of what that is. And then 6 months later, they realize, oh, shoot. This happened 6 months ago at this value. We should have asked for this much. Instead of 1,000, we should have gotten 6,000.
Exactly.
And then they send a bill that's called a supplemental tax bill saying, shoot, we didn't actually update our records in time. They never say that, but that's what it is.
You wish they would say that.
I wish they made it clear because it's that simple. It's not like you're paying the seller's bill. You are
Right.
paying the difference from what you were supposed to pay if the county had updated their records
Right.
correctly and accurately. And so since you only paid 1,000, you owe this supplemental. And it really should only happen once because the county should update the records and from then out you're okay.
Right.
I had a client get a supplemental tax bill once 2 years later.
Yep.
And it was huge, 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 huge because he did not have an impound account, of course, because we would have
Right.
caught it. We would have
Right.
had way too much money sitting in our impound account. And we would have said, listen, we have an overage. Here's a check for 10 grand. But because we didn't do an impound account, the county just kept billing him for like whatever, $1,800 every installment period.
Right.
And 2 years later, they sent him a bill for like 22 grand.
Oh yeah. Oh
And
yeah.
he had called me freaking out. And I was like,
Of course.
2 years. It took the county 2 years to realize.
But somebody needs to, along the way, tell that person that this will happen, like I do to my
Of
folks,
course.
and tell them to save the money for that. Now, question I have for you, because this has always been something I've been curious about, and I've never
Yeah.
asked a lender.
Yeah.
Is it preferable in any way, shape, or form to do an impound account to paying it by yourself? I've always thought that it was better for you to put your money into your own investment and you get the interest on the money. But
Totally. So good question. So impound accounts are phenomenal for first-time home buyers because it's one less thing for them to have to think about. So I would say on average, 90 to 95% of my first-timers are doing an impound account.
Mhm.
And only like maybe 50% of my second, third, fourth time home buyers and investors and stuff
yeah,
do an impound account. Some lenders charge to not do an impound account.
oh, interesting. I've
And they'll
never heard
charge
that.
it an eighth to a quarter on points, right? So not to the rate, but points to the rate cost
Mhm.
to not. And that's because they want the money, like you just said.
Mhm.
And it's funny, a lot of the times when I talk with clients and they're like, well, is there a fee for you to collect it and pay it for us? And I always giggle. I'm like, no, of course not. We explain that as a bank, why wouldn't we want to hold your money?
Right.
Now, to
Right.
you, holding $7,000 isn't going to really make or break the bank in interest, right?
Mhm.
But if we
Mhm.
have 10,000 clients holding $7,000 of their money, that is a huge difference for a mortgage servicer because
Right.
of course
No,
that interest
absolutely.
is quite a bit. Yes. So, but once I explain it to buyers that way, regardless of how small of interest they won't or will be making, they kind of always want to hold the money. They're kind of, you know
Well,
what I
makes,
mean?
it makes a lot of sense. I mean, I
Yeah.
think about that here. I don't think do you guys have point of sale ordinances for your sewer laterals where you are?
I don't think so.
Here, you are required to pay a $4,500 deposit to East Bay MUD, which is the East Bay Municipal
Oh, yeah.
Utility District, if your sewer lateral has not been certified. This line needs to be certified free and clear of debris and cracks, all the way to where it meets with the city line.
Wow.
And it's very expensive most of the time. An
Yeah.
average sewer lateral is about $7,000. Obviously,
That's the whole Bay Area?
that's Berkeley, Piedmont, Oakland, Alameda.
Wow.
They all have it in different ways, slightly different ways. But so East Bay MUD takes $4,500 to hold that deposit for 6 months. And then you need to prove that you've done your sewer line or they will not refund that money because they claim they're going to do it themselves. By the way, 9 times out of 10, they hold, if that happens, they hold the money, but you don't see them coming and doing the line. Just want to point that out. So it's a big financial bonanza for them every year.
I can't imagine.
Yeah, if there are 300,000 transactions that occur and they're holding $4,500 from 300,000 people, that's a lot of money making a lot of interest for East Bay MUD.
Unbelievable.
So to me, and that, by the way, passed through our legislature.
And the county just keeps that interest?
Mhm. And that passed through our legislature without even talking to one plumber, one realtor, one seller, one buyer. people lost their houses over it during the economic downturn, because there'd be a little old lady that was living in a house that was way the hell up on a hill that had like a 300 yard, or, let's say it was like a football field away to where the sewer line matched with the city sewer line. Well, that's like a $30,000 or $40,000 sewer line. And let's say that during the economic downturn, that the buyer for her, and she was selling short, by the way. And let's say that the buyer for her house was an FHA buyer who was only putting 3% down, and they could not afford to do that sewer line. The bank was exempted from the ordinance. They could take the property back in foreclosure and not be required to do the line. It's in the legislation.
The legislation. Wow. That is.
It's so corrupt.
I was just going to say that just is so corrupt. It's crazy. You know what else oddly is happening right now? Because interest rates are up and people are making money on their money, right?
Yeah.
So I know this sounds like funny for us to talk about, but it's just something to note. Wires are taking longer to land.
I have noticed.
Have you noticed that?
Mm-hmm.
So I had to pay a contractor, and I gave him 2 checks, and I had to pay him to, whatever, he's fixing a property that I have. And it was $16,000, and all the money left my account. So I
Immediately.
no longer had it.
Like instantly.
Pretty quickly once he deposited the check. Wells Fargo took 8 days to deposit it into his account.
Oh, I bet.
8 days. And I was like, what is going on? What is the hold? And they kept saying, we have to hold because it's a large amount and we're verifying. I'm like, what are you verifying?
No. They're making interest on that money.
8 days they held it.
No, I've been noticing on my closings that they will wire the money out to the sellers. And, my average price point is $1,520,000. So the seller, if they've owned the house for a long time, that's like $1 million being wired into their account. And if we close at like 9 o'clock in the morning on a Friday, 9 times out of 10, the money is not showing up in their account until Tuesday.
What?
Yeah. And I happen to know from my own financial stuff that I can wire something from my own financial institution at 9 o'clock in the morning. And they can.
It gets there by 10:30.
Exactly.
It's funny too. It's like they know what kind of wire it is as well, because my clients who have to wire to escrow their final funds, that always lands on time. Like there isn't a whole, funny, I haven't seen anyway in the past.
Right. It's when they're distributing money that it becomes problematic. So it makes me wonder whether the title companies are somehow making money on the money sitting there over a weekend. Or what? It just doesn't make any sense to me. I just had this happen recently. My client lives on the East Coast. We closed at 10 o'clock in the morning, and he did not have it was a Friday. He did not have his money until Tuesday. And they told me that the wire went out.
Was Monday a holiday?
No, it wasn't this last week.
Did you get proof, the wire reference number and everything?
Yeah, I got the number of everything that got sent out. But again, my guy the person who was selling the house works in the financial industry. And he said that should have been in his account by 6 o'clock at night.
Of course.
And it was that night of the day of the closing. But yeah, so you're right about that. So there's
it's funny. It's weird. I've never thought of
funny loopholes.
It's little loopholes now. It didn't matter 4 years ago when nobody was making money and it was so little. But now that people are actually able to earn interest on large savings and such.
I've also noticed
you're seeing these weird things.
And I'm also seeing people qualifying that probably back when loan rates were at 2.65, it would have been a lot harder for them to qualify because people want this money. They want the interest rates, and they're able to sell these loans to people that are going to be their investors very easily.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
There are many more options and what we call non-QM loans and things like that have definitely opened up doors.
Right. I've seen a lot of people that 4 years ago would not have qualified for a loan qualify. And it sort of reminds me a little bit, just a little tiny bit of like 2007 when, basically a paper bag could get a loan.
Yeah. I used to say if your dog can sign, he can get the loan if you want. Yeah. I was at Countrywide at the time, living it up.
Oh my Lord. Oh my Lord.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
We have the best product called fast and easy.
Oh, yeah.
And
Oh,
it
yeah.
was fast and easy. And just for all you listeners out there real quick, there were two types of loans at the time called CISA and SIVA. Or, NIVA, depending on what it was called. But it was basically stated income, stated assets. So you stated what your income was. We didn't verify it. And you stated what your assets were. We didn't verify it. And then there was SIVA, which is stated income, verified assets. So we would verify the asset. But nobody ever did SIVA. We always did CISA, which is fast and easy. People were
Right.
putting 0% down.
Yep.
You immediately set up the file as an 80-20, 80-20, 80-20, 80-20, 80-20, so that you didn't have mortgage insurance. So you had two loans, one at 80% and one at 20%.
Oh, and how about the
Docs
people
have to
looking,
go.
how about people during that same time period asking for credits back from,
Of course.
and they would get them.
Of course. And we would push over the 100% of financing as well. You could
Yep.
go to like 105% and get closing costs and get other things,
Mhm.
But we just immediately were set up and then you never got any documents. You pull the credit. If the credit wasn't good, your rate was higher, but you still
Right.
closed the loan. It was unreal. It didn't make any sense to me. And I remember, I started in 2005, like the end of 2005.
Mhm.
And when I started, the people who were teaching me how to set up the system, he's like, you're going to go in the system when somebody does an app and you're going to click fast and easy. And I was like, what? Why am I clicking fast and easy? And he's like, because you don't need any documentation. And I was like, why don't I need any documentation? Like, it made no sense to me. And I was like, wait, and they're not putting any money in either?
Yeah. No,
I mean, how could that not explode? How could
well,
that not?
well,
be
because
right,
people love, if what is that expression? If wishes were horses, then beggars would ride. I mean, people want the free thing, and if the free is the most liberating word in the world, and so yeah, we all went through that.
Nothing is free, and I tell people all the time, realtors, new loan officers, money isn't free.
Never. And
you think money is free, but money isn't free. You have to work for it in all different ways, even passive income. There is still energy that must go into it
correct
to receive it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And if it feels like it's too good to be true, it probably is. You and I both lived through that. I got licensed in 1998 or 1997. I mean, a long time ago.
Yeah.
And, so we've seen all of these. And I think there was an innocence also around financing that was prevalent in the early stages of my career. As I was discovering how to do all this stuff, I was fascinated with the idea that you could get $1 million from a bank. I mean, when you think about it, what just justifies that? And you have to think about economics. You have to think about how it all works. And then it took these downturns in 2003 and 2008, which is really when the bulk of the last economic downturn really occurred. And there had been one right before I got into the marketplace in the mid 90s. So all of them had different causes. The one that happened in 2007, 2008 was interesting because it was actually caused by the real estate industry as opposed to other circumstances.
By the banks?
Yeah, well, other circumstances. It was caused by the real estate industry and the banks, and just funny money happening with appraisals being overappraising when they shouldn't have overappraised. I mean, I saw people during that time period who had like 4 loans on a house and they were selling short. And they would be like, I'm not getting any money out of the situation. And I'd be like, well, you got the money. You bought your big screen TV. You bought your
right. You have 4 loans. Yeah.
And so I think it's better now. I think it's a lot better now.
Well, there's so much regulation now, right? Like in those days, even after Fast and Easy died and Countrywide died and, all of this stuff.
Yeah.
I still was able to like call an appraiser and be like, hey, I need this value to come in at 765 and I need it tomorrow.
Right. We all could do that.
That is not allowed anymore. Right. I'm not even allowed to speak to an appraiser, just so, like nothing, can get under the sheets when it comes to a value and an appraisal. And it really needs to be much more on the up and up, let's say.
And it's what's really sad about that too, is that back in the day, I've never, ever done anything fallacious or fraudulent in my entire life. I'm just like that. And I know you're like that too. And we
Never once did a
yeah.
neg-am. Never once did a negative amortization.
We used to actually have relationships with appraisers. We used to actually know who the good appraisers were. We used to know who would probably underappraise. Nowadays, I don't know very many of them. There are people coming from all over the place. When I get a phone call from an appraiser who wants to get into a property, sometimes I will ask them, are you local? Because where I am, there are different neighborhoods, like Oakland. Perfect example. It's a gigantic city. People have no idea how enormous Oakland actually is. It's all different neighborhoods, and East Oakland, West Oakland, Rockridge, Montclair, they all are different valuation. You can take a 1,500 square foot house in each of those neighborhoods, and depending on where it is, the square foot value could be from $300 a square foot up to $1,200 a square foot. And if somebody doesn't know what they're doing and they come in from like Sacramento because they want to make money as an appraiser, they may not have the tools to do the proper job. And part of my job as a realtor is to grill these people and make sure that it comes out okay, because they just don't know. And in the old days, we didn't have to go through that. And so a lot of the personal aspect of the job has gone away because of these regulations.
Well, true. And that is what it's supposed to be. It is supposed to be third party. It is supposed to be somebody who doesn't know you so that they can make the right decision about without
prejudice,
without any sweetness. You know what I mean? They have to be able to make an informed decision on a property without feeling any pressure to pull it in higher or anything with it.
Right.
Now, with that said, if you have a preferred lender that you use, like me and a lot of my agents that I use in this area that we know, I have a preferred panel of appraisers.
Correct.
And it's the same appraisers that I use specific to the area. So I've got 3 appraisers that I use in the hills. I have 3 appraisers that I use in Nela, which is Northeast LA. I have, and I don't get to choose who it is, and I don't get to talk to them or anything. But my agents who I work with regularly, they know the appraiser. They're like, Kevin's coming out. Oh, right. Jennifer's coming out. She's the one. Oh, fantastic. Oh, you know what I mean?
And I still offer comps to appraisers sometimes when I think it's going to be a tough appraisal.
You should always.
And they're willing to do that. And, the best mortgage brokers do have a panel of appraisers that when they saw this regulation coming down the pike, they set things up for themselves in such a way that they were able to have a panel of appraisers.
Exactly.
The companies that don't let you do that, like I have had people have loans through companies, and this is not to denigrate them at all, but like Rocket Mortgage or eLoan, they're like
they're electronic mortgages though. So
they're nationwide, and they don't have any idea of who they're serving or where they're serving. They're just getting the money. And so there is no connection like that when you're dealing with them. And they will send out an appraiser from Sacramento to look at a house in West Oakland because that's who they've got for that day. So you have to be careful. And as a realtor or as a mortgage broker, these are situations that you sort of go through. I haven't seen too many appraisals that aren't happening lately because property values are down. But like in 2021, when we all had like insane years and prices were crazy,
people were offering, money was free basically at 2.875. So they were able to offer 200,000 more than the list price or what it was even valued.
Sometimes $1 million more. And you knew that house wasn't going to appraise.
Yeah.
So, and people became responsible for the difference between the appraised value and what it was they had offered for the house too. So that's a conversation that you had to have with people all the time.
All the time. And you can't expect the appraiser to do it just because you're willing to. That's what I used to tell people. Just because you're willing to pay more for it doesn't mean you expect the appraiser to bring this in a value that's just simply not applicable to the area at this point. You will make it, but
and especially now where you've got a lot of people who are looking at appraisers, I should say, that are looking at pricing from the last 6 months. The last 6 months were not good. So if the market is picking up, and the first few months after the market picks up, is the most dangerous time for appraisals because the comps that they're using were from 6 months before, and they're not going to be as good. So I'm feeling that, though. Aren't you feeling that the market's picking up and doing?
I do. Yes, I do feel like that. And so do my agents and stuff. Yeah, it does feel, at this point, everybody is aware of the rate. And they have had plenty of time to digest it. And last year they were actually higher. So now it feels like an in-between place of like, you know what? I was looking at higher last year. And now that they're this, I'm ready to jump in, even though honestly they should have bought last year because, but because the values and everything. But, but yes, it does feel like people are finally like, not necessarily complaining about rate. The only people I have who complain about rate are the people that I financed 4 years ago who were like 6.7 and you're like 6.7 is great. I locked people in last November at 7.7. So like 6.7 is amazing. And they're like, they're at 3. And I'm like, listen, thank your lucky stars you got a 3. I don't think we will see those again.
Ever again.
Very, very long time. God forbid if we were, it's because there is some sort of.
I mean, there was a gigantic pandemic is what caused all of that.
It was a worldwide pandemic that shut down the entire world. It shut down the entire world and rates went down. Hastily rates went down. We didn't need them to come down. I always say like, nobody was asking for that rate. Nobody was wanting it. Nobody was needing it.
Right.
And the Fed hastily dropped it to 0.
I actually feel differently about that than you. I think that a lot of people were in a financial world of hell when the COVID pandemic hit.
For the first few months, but not for 2 years that we
correct. That is absolutely correct. And I think if they had corrected it as much earlier, it would have been better for the economy ultimately.
They quickly dropped it. They should have quickly raised it.
Exactly.
When everything started getting better, because people are people. Like we were talking about before, and we will take advantage of any situation we can because that's what people do.
Right.
And I tell people, listen, rates are the way they are now because they went that low. What comes up must come down and what goes down must come up. And we have to even out the playing field of what having rates in the low 3s, high 2s, and ramifications of that. That's
gigantic ramifications. And anybody that you know who has a grandma who was living on a fixed income that was dependent upon their investments during that time period, they went through a very long period of privation over those interest rates. And also just statistically, I mean, it's a really weird thing to think of, but interest rates have hovered between 5 and 7% since Roman times. 5 to 7% is normal. That is absolutely normal. Abnormal is 13%. Abnormal is 2%. But 5 to 7% is exactly where it's been pretty much the whole time. So,
exactly. And the fact of the matter is 5 to 7% to me feels very fair. That's what I tell my clients. If you were to give somebody $1 million, isn't that what you would want to earn?
Yeah, absolutely.
It feels very fair to me.
Don't
13
you feel
is
cheated?
Way too much.
Yeah. Don't you feel cheated ridiculous. When you have like, you go in and put money into a savings account and you're only making 3% on your money? Doesn't that feel like a cheat to you?
Right. Or 1.5, wherever we were back that,
or negative. That happened in Europe for quite some time.
I know.
So I have another question to ask you before we're done with all of it. I came into an unusual situation a couple of weeks ago with a caretaker who had inherited a house from her client. And her client did everything correctly. In California, we have a law that protects elderly people against fraud by caretakers because unfortunately there's been so much fraud. That means that if a caretaker inherits a property, they have to go through a lot of hoops, including probate generally, to verify that they have the right to inherit that
legally. Yeah.
But in this particular case, the woman had borrowed $70,000 from a reverse mortgage company almost 30 years ago. And they charged her 13% compounding interest over that entire time. And when the caretaker went to figure out what was going on, it turned out that $70,000 had turned into $850,000.
Oh my God.
And that seems to me to be uxorious and like it should not have ever happened. But as far as I can tell from reading all the fine print that this woman brought to me, and I got her to an attorney and she's trying to work out the whole thing. But that seemed to me from looking at their fine print that they had protected themselves and they actually could charge that amount of money on that money.
Yeah. Well, it is. Yes, because nobody's paying the mortgage.
Right.
So it's essentially, reverse mortgages are essentially NAGAMs, negative amortization loans.
Right.
So the loan gets bigger with every month and it compounds itself on a monthly because the money that you're not paying actually gets added to the loan amount and the loan just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger.
Right. Right.
The thing is, she should have known that the loan was getting bigger and bigger, or it's not that reverse mortgages do things illegally where they don't send statements.
Mm-hmm.
There are statements that come out, especially on the yearly with 1098s and things like that. So the person who passed knew the balance and knew or should have known every year forthcoming what that new balance was and handled it or had somebody handle it. It sounds to me, even though it should be elder abuse, honestly, to charge somebody like that and out of a 70,000 have an 800,000, it feels wrong, of course, and like elder abuse, but it sounds as well like negligence on their part of not actually.
Although if somebody becomes non-compos mentis, it's
for sure
their fault, but
100%. But when did that happen and how much awareness was there?
There's no way to figure that out. Anyway, I just wanted to bring that up to you.
Totally. Reverse mortgages are difficult to sell for me, even though, like all the mortgages that are very difficult to sell, you make a lot of money on. And I feel like there's a reason for that. And I hate, that was the same thing with NAGAMs. Bank of America, if I did a NAGAM, would pay me like 4%, where normally lenders make way less, under 1%. We don't make near what realtors make. But you would get basically quadruple or more if you could sell a NAGAM. And I never did one because it never made financial or logical sense to me.
And you don't want to be taking advantage of people ever.
And it was just a loan that took advantage of people. And and reverses aren't that. If somebody legitimately needs the money, they can be extremely helpful. If somebody has a ton of debt that they need to get rid of and they don't earn the money to pay it and they have a home, that is a beautiful way to take care of their liabilities for them. Like there's reasons why reverse mortgages are extremely helpful and have their place in the mortgage world. You just have to really understand the fine print and know when to get out of them because they are, in my opinion, temporary loans. And people don't think that reverse mortgages as temporary loans.
No, every single time I've ever come across a reverse mortgage, it's been some horrible situation where the person's died and the heirs are attempting to deal with it. And I've never seen one this bad as the one that I saw a couple of weeks ago.
That's awful. Yeah.
But I have seen situations where people have been abused, taken advantage of. I worry about them quite a bit. Yeah. Listen, I have got to go. Unfortunately.
Yes, I know. We took it all. I mean, I didn't even ask you all my questions.
Well, we can meet again.
I think the appraisal and the reverse mortgage. And I mean, we talked quite a bit about great content.
Okay. Yeah. Because you're just wonderful. I just adore you. I think.
Oh my gosh. Thank you.
I remember you so fondly from when we first talked. And I feel like we could probably talk all day long.
I know. I mean, this hour was so fast and I have a list of questions. I got through one.
Well, let's set up another time and we'll go through them again, but you're just lovely. Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity. All righty. Take good care.
Right, have a wonderful afternoon.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Mortgage on My Mind. If you're ready to start your mortgage journey or have any questions, I'd love to help. With 20 years of experience, I make the process as simple and stress-free as possible. Check the show notes for my contact info and don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this podcast. Until next time, I'm Natalie Salins, here to help make your real estate dreams a reality.